users and creating groups yesterday. So we're going to continue from there. There is something we were able to create a user. We're also able to create groups for the benefit of those that were not here yesterday. So we're doing user management, right? In user management, so the idea is you're a DevOps engineer, you have members of your groups. For example, you have DevOps groups, you have developers groups. So these developers, right? You have developers groups, you have the architects, you have, so all these people need to have different privileges, right? So you're asked to create groups and give people privileges, right? So for you to give them different privileges, either to write a file or read a file or execute a file, right? Not everybody would be given the same privilege. So you're asked to put them in groups. Now, we created two groups yesterday. One was the developers group, the other one was the DevOps groups. Now, these are the users, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. These are the members of the groups. So what we did first was we create the users. Now, we use the command user add to create the users. So this is the command that we use. User add to create the users. Now we also create groups, right? Then we move the users inside the group. So we use another command called group add to create the groups, right? Then we moved the users into those different groups, right? And we're able to view the groups that we created. We're able to also view the users that we created. So that's where we ended yesterday. So we're going to continue today. The only thing that I did not do yesterday was to change group ownership in a file. Say, for example, you have, every group has, okay, let me show you this. I think I better show you it. It will make sense if I show you. Let me clear this. If I do, you can see my screen, right? If I do ls-l, okay, you see it gives me a long format. This long format, so this is the permission. We'll explain this to you, we'll explain all this to you. Read, write, execute, read, all right. These are all permissions. But when you go into this is the user. So the user of this file right now is EC2 user, right? And the group is developers. So this is the name of the file. This is when the file was created, right? And this is the name of the file, okay? So EC2 user, developer. So that's the owner of this file. This file is owned by EC2 user and it belongs to the group developers, okay? With that, we can explain this. Okay, so but you can change the ownership of the file, right? To change the group ownership of the file, you use this command, right? So, but before we do that, I know some of you are still trying to set up your AWS account and trying to create your mobile XTM to be able to connect. So what I'm going to do, we're going to go back to AWS account. I want to create a new instance so we can start working with a new instance. So if I go to Google, I want to access my AWS account, right? So I can go to Amazon Web Services, right? And I can sign in. Once I sign in, I'm using a root user. Usually you're not supposed to be, at your workplace, you'll never use root user. You use IAM user, but I'll get into that when we get there, okay? But don't worry about this right now. Just sign in as a root user. That's fine. Enter your password and sign in. Okay, so once you come to this interface, right, you see your services are all here, but it gives you a dashboard, and the dashboard will show you where you visited previously, makes it easier for you. Just go to your EC2, right? Now EC2, I have instances running already, right? I have this instances that I'm using, which I don't really need to keep it. I'm doing some Kubernetes with the other class, so I want to keep it. So let me delete these ones because I don't need it. I'm going to recreate a new one so they can stop charging me. So I'm going to terminate these two instances. And that's how to terminate an instance. Select the instance. If you want to terminate it, go to instance states, right, and terminate. If I want to stop this instance, I'll just go to stop. I'll stop it. Stopping means I have not terminated it. Terminate means it's gone. You can't have anything. If you stop it, you can also restart it, right? You can start the instance again, right? So by the end of the day, if you're not going to use an instance again, you can stop the instance. Now, if you want to use it again, but when you stop it, you're going to lose your IP address because the IP address is dynamic. The public IP address is very dynamic, right? So what you do is when you start it again, you have to reconnect it using your mobile extend with a new IP address. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new instance. Okay, for the benefit of those that are still struggling creating an instance, I'll call it a name. I'll call it, for example, class 003B. Okay, that's a name. You can call it any name. And I want to select a Red Hat, right? And right at this point, I just want a free tier eligible, right? So I will create this, leave this alone, just leave it alone. A free tier eligible is good so you don't get charged, okay? I'm going to use T2 macro. This is the default, this is free, so I'll use this. Another thing I will do is I will create a key pair, right? This is where you create your key pair. So if you select this, you'll create a key pair. Tricks for you, once you create your key pair here, your key pair should get in your download folder. You don't need to use SSH keygen again to create a new key pair, right? All you need to do is to use the key pair that you have here to SSH into your cloud, okay? So I will create a key pair here, and I've created so many already, so I don't want to create another one, but this is how to create it. Click on create, give it a name here, whatever name you want to call it. For example, IT, then hit create key pair, and that key pair will be stored in your download folder, okay? So I'm going to select one that I created earlier. I think I have class 003. Let's use this one, right? Like I created earlier. So we'll use that one. Once you do that, click on launch, and your instance will be launched, right? It's a very simple process. It's not complicated at all. And you cannot break anything. Don't be scared of getting into AWS instance. Trust me, it's very robust. You can't break the system, right? So try everything that you want to try. If you make a mistake, you can always terminate the terminal and create a new one. If you messed up anywhere, just terminate it. You cannot destroy anything in the AWS instance. I can guarantee you that. So you can play around with it as much as you can, but make sure what you play around with, because if you provision something that is very expensive, they will charge you. I don't want you to see $1,000 bill coming from AWS. So be careful what you do when you're playing around, okay? Okay, so it's a live system. It's a live system. It's not a sandbox. It's actually AWS instance. That's their data center. So it's not a sandbox that you play around, but you cannot break it, but know exactly what you're doing. So if you go get a dedicated host, for example, this is a dedicated host. The dedicated host costs a whole lot of money, right? So they will charge you, I think, per minute or per hour. And before you know it, you get bill coming by the end of the month, and you're wondering, what did I do? So be careful while you're playing around, so you don't get charged. Okay, so we've created the new instance. What did they call it? Class 003B. So this is it. So you can just select it here. This is the IP address I was telling you about. This IP address is a public IP address, so it's dynamic. So if I stop this instance right now, this IP address would go away, but my private IP address will stay. right? It's not going to change, but my public. But because I'm trying to SSH from my laptop to the cloud, and these are different networks, right? The cloud is a different network. They are not in the same network. So I need to use a public IP address. And if I stop my instance and start it again, this will change. But there's another thing they call elastic IP. It costs money. If you want an elastic IP that doesn't change, right? You can select, you can use elastic IP, but they will charge you on a monthly basis, right? For elastic IP. Right. For now, I would not encourage you to do that. Right. Let's keep using this. If you stop your instance, create a new one will be created when you start the instance and just use it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this IP address and go to my mobile XTEM, right? In my mobile XTEM, this is the interface for my mobile XTEM. So I killed this that instance. So let me remove this. So my mobile XTEM, let me restart this. I'll go to Session, right? Go to SSH, then I'll paste the IP address here. Then go to enter my username. Username for my Red Hat is EC2 user. Okay. Then advanced SSH, select the use key, private key. Then I have to look for the key pair, right? The key pair is always stored in the download folder, right? And the one I had is, you can do a search. If you can't find it, you can just type it here, class 003, for example, and it will search it for you. Then click OK, then accept it. Right, it did not go through. Okay, so there's a problem. Let me try that again. I must have used the wrong key pair. Okay, EC2 user, advanced SSH. What key pair did we use? Class 003, right? So let's search. So this is the one that we use, class 003, the PIM, not B. Okay, now it's authenticated, right? So now I'm now connected to that cloud. So I can start running, right? I can start running my commands. Okay, for those of you that are still struggling, so I will keep repeating it over and over. We'll do a lot of that so you can master how to create, to SSH into your cloud. Okay.
Hey, I see.
Yes.
Sorry, please. Can you go back to AWS? You have an IP 172.3.125.1.9. I want to see if that's what was on the private, on the AWS.
So this is
so it's the same one. Okay.
Yeah, so when you,
Okay,
this
gotcha.
is
Thank
one,
you.
okay, once you have your mobile XTEM to know which instance that you're running, so it will be the same here. This is your private IP address. It's the same, yeah. Okay. Okay, so with that, let's get back to our lectures. Okay, so what we're going to do is to change the group ownership, because now we have an ownership here. This into screens. Can someone mute? It's a background noise going on there. Okay, let me bring my mobile XTEM here. Okay. You can see both screens now. All right. So if I do LL, right, I don't have any file here. Right. So let me create a file. How do we create a file? We use the touch command to create an empty file, right? So I create a file, call this file, what do I call it? Class 003, right? I've created this file now. So if I do LL now, you see it gives me a long explanation of who owns this file. This file is owned by EC2 user. The group is also EC2 user, right? So let me create a group, right? So if I use sudo group add. I want to call the group developers. Developers, right? So that group is created. Let me create another group, right? I'll create another group, call it sudo group add DevOps. I've created another group now. So I've created two groups. Now let me create some, let me create users, right? So how do we create users? Use user add, call it A, right? Then user add, call it B. User add, call it C. User add, call it D. Okay, we might be using this, so let's create it now. Okay, so I have this created. So I have developers now. What I'm going to do is this. If you look at, if I do LL, we can do LL, we can do ls-l. That will be give you the same thing, right? It gives me the user, it gives me the owner, it gives me the user, the group, the owner and the group, right? Which is EC2 user. If I want to change, I have a group called developer. If I want to change my file, any of this file, right? For example, if I do ls ll, if I have, okay, let's create, I have a file. Which file do I have here? ls. I have a file called class 003, right? I have a file called class 003. And if I do ll again, so this file is owned by EC2 user. I want to change this file to be owned by developers, right? So I would do something like this, sudo chown space column developers, right? Then the name of my file is called what? Class 003. Invalid group name. So we missed the group name is called developers. I missed O here. Developers, right? Okay, so if I do LL again now, you see the group ownership has changed. Now, the group ownership of this file is owned by developers, right? The user is still EC2 user, but the developers has changed. I can also, if I have another file, say create another file, let me touch a file, call it IT file, right? So if I do ls now, I have IT file in here. If I do ll, right, this file is owned by EC2 user. Now I want to change the group ownership of this file, right? I want the ownership to be DevOps, right? So I do sudo chown, right, space column, call it DevOps, right? Then the name of the file is IT file. That ownership has changed now. If I do LL, right, I've changed the ownership of this file. So this file belongs to the group DevOps. Okay, so that's how to change the ownership of the file. That's the only thing we did not do yesterday to complete user management, right? So with that, we have completed user management, right? Now you know how to create a user, you know how to create a group, right? And you know how to add a user to a group. Remember, we use sudo user modification. For example, we have all those, the users. If you have A's, B's, C's, now if you want to add A's, B's, C's to a group called developer, you can do sudo user mod, which is user modification, and someone asks what AG stands for, and we agree maybe it's add group. Then we have developers, right? And the name maybe A, right? Now, meaning we're adding A to the group called developers, right? And we can also do the same thing and add B's to that group of developers. That's adding the user B's to the developers. And we can add C's, right, to DevOps. This is a group called DevOps. we have another group that we created called DevOps. Okay. And we can also add these to DevOps. Right. So these groups are added now. So if I do get entire group, right? Say DevOps, right? So this will give me the entire group. See, these are the things that we added. We added this user and this user to this group. I can also say get entire group developers, right? And will give me the users that are inside developers, right? So that's user and group account. And we also see how we can have a file, create a file, and change ownership of the file. So for the file that I created and I changed the ownership to developers, so developers have access right to those files, and we can give them privileges as well. We'll take a look at how to give privileges in further slides down the line. Okay, so that's user account and group management. Okay, any question?
Yeah, so
All right, go ahead.
yeah, when you do touch, what kind of file is it creating? Are they TXT files or?
It's just, you're not giving it any extension. It's just going to be, you can do a touch, you can give it an extension. Say, for example, you want to create, oh, sorry, what did I do here? So if you do a touch right here, you want to create, for example, you want to write a code in Java, right? And you call it my file dot Java files stop with, or maybe you want to create a YAML file, for example, what, right? Now you're creating a YAML file. If you don't give it any extension, it's just like you creating a file, don't give it any extension. But you can give it an extension. The extension now would give it, denote it to mean something. Without an extension, it's just a file, right? It doesn't default to anything. And there's an empty file anywhere, but you can go in and add the contents to the file. When you add the contents, that's when you're creating meaning to that file, right? So if I do VI now, right, my file.yaml. So the contents, what this content expects
Empty.
is a YAML content, right? YAML content that you can use to run file. Without giving any extension, it's just a file, right? Okay. Any other question?
How did you clear that empty YAML stuff back to this?
To clear what?
You just went back from you removed the
Oh,
YAML
when I
entry.
did the VI command. So what I did was
Yeah. How
you
did you
can
go back?
just, okay, let me give you some commands. I didn't want to get it in here. So you can do, if I don't want to save, I can do colon, see me typing colon here, Q, exclamation sign, right? That's, I'm closing it without saving it. Okay. Now, if I open it again, so if I open it again, you see there's nothing in there, right? I'm saving it, but I can add contents to this. To add contents, if you hit I, will put you on insert mode, right? This is an editor. So it puts you in insert mode. The insert mode, then I can add. Right? Now I've added something. If I hit the escape key now, the mode has gone. So I can use, I think, column WQ, right, to save this file. So if I open the file again, that information is saved, right? I can also use, if I hold my shift key and hit Z twice, I can also save it. So there are two ways to do it. Don't worry, we're getting ahead. I have a slide for this and all the details, but we're getting ahead right now. Just wanted to answer your question, right? So we'll get back to this, right? If you didn't get it, don't worry. I have a detail, so we'll get back to this. I have all that covered in this lecture. Okay. So we've completed. Any other question? Okay. I have also some homework. Some homework for you to do on this. So on user management. So just try your best to see how you can answer those questions. Some of the answers to the question, if you do not know, is still down the slide that we're going to cover. I think this user ID and all that is down the line. So if you can't answer it right now, I might cover it today, so you'll be able to answer the questions. Okay. So the homework is for your practice, is for your own good, so you can reinforce what you've learned and see if you actually capture it. In a situation that you are totally lost, you cannot even answer any of the questions, please send me a text message. I'm always available to answer any questions. Okay. If I don't get back to you immediately, I will surely make sure I get back to you with the answers. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get back into this, but there are some things that we're missing when you're creating a user. I did not show you how to delete a user after you created a user. I did not also show you how to create a password and how to actually use that as a user. So let's get into that right now. So to create a user, like we've done, if you do sudo user add, the name of the user, whatever name you, in this case, let's do FEE, right? That user is created. Now, how do I delete this? How do I delete the user that I've created, right? In the first place, let's use this user. You can use sudo user del, and that would delete it, right? You don't have it anymore. So it's deleted, it's gone, right? So, but whenever you create a user, Linux system is based on security. You have to also create a password, right? Because for you to be able to access that user, you will ask for a username and password. If you don't have a password, right, you cannot access, it keep asking you until you get frustrated. It won't let you do anything, right? So you have to create a password. For example, we have a user. What we're using right now is an EC2 user, right? So we can create a password for EC2 user, or we have a user called A. So if we use that user, let me clear this. If you use that user A, I'm thinking the best way to do this. If you use the user A, so let's do this. I can create a password. Let me change directory. Sudo, I want to change sudo su means change user or switch user. Su means switch user. So I want to switch user to AEE, right? Now the user now is AEE, right? So I've switched this user. I know I didn't show you how to do it. And I use a sudo before I do that. Okay, let me do this again. SUB. I did not elevate my privilege. So it's asking me for the password. I did not create a password for this. I was able to switch to A because I elevated my privilege using sudo. But if I did not use sudo, it's going to ask me for username and password. And I don't have it because I didn't create one, right? So let me get out of this. If I hit Control C, it will take me out of that, okay? Clear. So if I can create a password now for the user, right? So I can do sudo password, and that password, I want to call it A as well, right? So it's sudo password, is asking me for a password. I will not be able to do this. So it won't let me do this. So hold on, let's get out of this. Clear. I need to exit this. I need to exit it back. And this is where you create the password, right? Because you each C2, so you have all the privilege, right? Even though I use a privilege to switch as a user to become A, right? I did not create a password for A. So if I want to do anything as A, I would not have that privilege. So Linux is very strong on security. You wouldn't be able to do anything. So you cannot access someone's, you cannot impose yourself as someone else and use that to do anything and make changes in the system. You won't be able to do that. So I can do a password change here, sudo password, right? So I want to change a password for A user. Now it's asking me for what's the new password. Then I can give the new password, right? Retype the password. I retype the password, right? Now, so if I switch the user now, sudo su A, right? And I want to change the password now, sudo password, right? It's going to ask me for that password. And I can enter that password and I'm able to, right? And I can make those changes. So without that password, you cannot do anything. So this is the formula to, this is the command to change the password. Sudo password, then the username, right? Sudo password, then the username. So it will prompt you to enter the password. You enter the password. So I've created a password for A. So let me exit this. Let me get
What
back.
does it mean?
Say that again.
The system was asking you a question about the SU doers group.
Sudo
That's
group.
okay.
So sudo group is, if you want to add, sudo group is an elevated privilege group. So sudo means, so you can add a user to a sudo group, right? So if you want to do, when we start doing automation, we'll get back to this. You want to elevate, when you're doing automation, you don't want to use sudo, stop and give privilege. So if you're a user and the user wants to run an automation, right? So you would put the user in the sudoers group. There's a group called sudoers group. There's an elevated privilege, right? So they'll give you the privilege to run this thing without asking you for password, right? So if you add a user to sudoers group, that user has entire privilege to execute, to write, and to read. That's what it means.
But you still have to put sudo before you
No, once you
do
have,
this command.
once you put the user in the sudoers group, no, you don't need to use sudo anymore to run the command.
I see.
Yeah, so that's what it means. So, so let's create another password. Now I'm here, so if I do sudo password, and I want to create a password for the user B. Right, so it's going to ask me for the password. I want to use the same. You can use any password, but I just want to use the same name so I don't mess it up. So the password I want to create is B. Right, give it a new password, call it B. Right, so that password is created now. So I can change the user to now B. Right now with the password, if I want to do anything, right? See, I don't have permission, right? So if I do sudo ll, right, it's going to ask me for a password. So you can't get past it without a password. You need to enter a password to be able to do anything that you need to do, right? It's going to, yeah, sudo ls, right? Then you have to enter a password, right? So that's the thing. You can't get past it. You have to enter a password. That's why you need to know how to create a password. If you create a user, you also have to create a password along with the user. Okay, so let me clear this again. So how do I delete to delete a user, right? We did that already. So I have a user called A, so I want to delete this user. So do sudo user del A, right? Now the problem here is this A is deleted. The user is deleted, but the home of A because like when you create a user, it's created in a home directory. The home directory for A is still there. So for example, let's try to create A again. Let's do sudo user add A. So it gives you a warning. So the home directory A, even though I had deleted it, the home directory is still there, it still exists. It was not deleted, even though I deleted the A user. So for you to delete the A user and delete the home directory, so you can, if you want to recreate that name, you have to use a -r option. So you can do sudo user del -r option, then the name of the user. Now it would completely remove the home directory. So if I want to recreate this A again, so if I want to do sudo user add A, we've already done this. If you want to add a user to a group, so you use a user modification command, user mode, right? I showed you how to do this. Now, if you want to add a user to a particular group, you can also use a -g option, right? This -g option would not use it, even though it would by default, if you use it, is still going to. So get entire group. Let me see the group that we have. We have this entire group. We still have group developers, and so we still have developers and DevOps, right? So if I do get entire group and do DevOps, right? I have these users inside this group. Okay. Let me create, just for the benefit of, let's create another group, right? So let's do sudo group add. What do I call this group? Let's call it manager, right? So we have a group called manager.
We can call them area boys.
Okay. And I want to add, so let me create another user, right? So sudo user add, that's how you create a user add G. Okay, now I've created that user now, and I want to add the user G to the group manager, right? So I can do sudo user mode -g, right? The group name is called manager. Manager, did I spell that right? Manager, right? Then the name that I want to use to add to manager is G. Okay.
How to add something. Do you understand how to play game or a pad?
Yeah. Yeah, Louis, are you asking a question? Okay, so now that has been added. So if I want to check, let me check. If I do get entire group, and the group that I want to look at is manager, right? Where is my G? I added G to manager. It's not there, right? I thought I added G to manager.
Maybe should we use the AG command?
Yeah, the AG command. Yeah, AG command is what we used previously. So if we do user mode, the AG command, the G option should do the same thing like the AG command. So let's do it again. Get entire group manager, right? The AG command would ask that. So, well, it does, the G command is supposed to do the same thing as the AG command, but for some reason it's not working. So AG command is what you use, right? I think the G command is when you want to create a new group, right? So if you use sudo user mode and you want to create a new group, say product managers, right? And you want to add P manager. So that is not exist. So you have to actually create it first before you use it. Okay. So I would strike this out. I will strike this command out for now. Let's use the AG option, not the G option, right? Let's use the AG option. Now we've added G to a group called manager. Another thing I want to show you is to lock a user account. To lock a user account to prevent the login. So one of your employees, maybe the developer messed up, right? And you want to lock him out of the account. You don't want him to access the account, right? What do you do, right? How do you lock him out of the account, right? You have to know how to lock somebody. So your manager calls you, say, yeah, this guy has committed one kind of crime on the system. I want you to lock him out of I want you to lock him out of the system. He doesn't access the system. Of course, for example, the guy is A, right? The guy name is A committed. So what you do is sudo password -L, then A, right? So that would lock A out of the system. A cannot access the system anymore. Then, okay, then yeah, A goes to the manager and I'm sorry, I did not do it intentionally. I'm sorry, I would never do it again. Then manager phones you back and say, okay, right, go ahead and let A back into the system. So you just go back and do sudo password -U, right? You have unlocked the password for A, so A can access the system now. So it's very simple and easy. Use the password command, right, to lock the system. This is the -L, right? Right. Use it to lock with the -L command. You can lock a user out, and you can unlock a user using a -U option. Okay.
I have a question.
Right. Go ahead.
So let's say like in the work environment, and the boss, does access to lock a user, and out of nowhere we just forgot, we forgot the command. Is there like a cheat sheet that we can possibly use to refer to those like commands and stuff?
Okay, let me tell you this, okay? Google is your friend. In this DevOps world, use Google as a friend, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at it, right? Okay, I forgot a command to use because you'll not remember there's 1,000 commands in Linux. You're not going to be able to remember all of them, but you know they exist. All I need to do for you to know on this one is to use it to pass your interview, right? Another thing is to have understanding that yes, you can do this, right? So if you go to Google, how do I log out a user in Linux, right? Linux will Google will give you everything, the command line. So you open this up, right? Let's see, it should be there. The password -L, then the username, right? And it gives you other options, right? So Google would be your friend. If you forget any command, use Google. It's always there, right? So that's how to remember if you forget. But you know that you can log out someone, right? In this class, you never knew you can log someone out. But in the class, you know how to. But do I remember the command? I do not, right? How do I add a user to a group? How do I create a group, right? Just go to Google. Or you can have your cheat sheet. After this class, you can create your own cheat sheet. Put all the commands in one folder that you can remember, that you can always reference to, right? Or use Google as your friend. Google will help you out. Right? The thing is a lack of knowledge that the thing even exists, that we can do it. right? Once you know you can do it, you can, then you can use Google. Now you can also set, when you set someone's password, you create a password, set someone's password, you can put an expiration date to a user, right? And how do you do that, right? Use this command. This command doesn't work very well for me, so I use an alternative. I use the charge command. This is the one that I'm really familiar with, all right? To put an, for example, if I want to put an expiration date on is, the username is, I'll use the charge command, sudo charge -e, right? Then I can provide the date. I can use this date format, or I can use, so 01/01/2014, 2024. 2024, I don't want, 2024 is the last day for A, right, to be in our company. So we'll want to, you want to put an expiration date on A, so we can do that. Wait a minute, I made a mess here. It's CHGE, right? Right. So that will put an expiration date. So once that expiration date reaches, this aide would not have access to the system anymore. You've locked him out, right? And if for some reason A says, I'm not retiring anymore on January 1st, 2024, I remove my, because they put, when they want to retire, they put a request to retire, and you put it in there. You say, okay, I've changed my mind, I want to stay for another 1 year. All right, so you want to remove that. Just all you need to do is just go back and do sudo charge -e, and you won't use -1, and the username was A, and that will change it back, right? It will put him back in the system. The expiration date will go away, right? And if you don't remember, again, if you don't remember this command, you can always Google it. How do I put an expiration date